fixing to change the serving and the D-loop. This is Jimmy Sewell, Southern Bones Outdoors. So the first thing, we're going to remove the serving and the D-loop. So when you're doing this, you need to be really careful because it's real easy to clip your string. And so when the string is under pressure, it's kind of like taking a sharp knife, you know, and you touch the string and it'll just, you know, take off and break. So I suggest getting some nice little snippers that's super sharp. I got these at Harbor Freight in the wiring department. And so when I do it on a bow press. So what I want to do is relax that string so I can get in here and clip one of the strands on the serving. And now that I am a little older, my eyesight ain't what it was, so I've got a little magnifying glass and a light here. And so the key to it is once you get it broke, you're home free, but you got to really be careful. I don't like using a razor blade on this particular situation because it's super sharp, and I just tend to not be exactly as accurate with a razor blade as I am these little snippers. So removing the serving is pretty simple. You just undo it almost like it's threaded rod. So remember that when you're doing a serving, once it's tied in, once it's set, it has threads. Threads being like on a threaded rod. So if you use a tie-on knock, you can spin it just like left and right, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, to move it up and down the string. So this is Cameron's bow. He's a young man. I think he's about 12 years old. And so his serving had gotten really loose, and Chris was trying to sight it in, and he noticed that it was sliding up. So what happens on older serving, it won't have a good grip and it'll begin to slide. And I've dealt with it on my bow before. Probably when you have a string that's 3 or 4 years old, if you take care of it, really pay attention to the serving, because once it starts sliding, it's real easy not to notice, and it can change your knock point about 1/16 of an eighth of an inch, and unless you're looking for it, it'll kind of camouflage itself. So once we've got the serving completely off, I'm going to do a super serving on it, is what I call it. Back in the day, I used to call it Jimmy's super serving. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the string. I'm going to just spread the string apart. Now when you're doing serving, there's something you need to have. I don't know what you call it. It's just a tool that I made that moves the string away from the cables so you can have room to work and maneuver this serving tool. So spread the string, separate it evenly, and you're going to take and you're going to start and you're going to thread this through. It don't have to be in a knot, but I tend to loop it over, back through a couple times on opposite sides, just to ensure that it doesn't pull out as you're doing the serving. So on your serving tool, there's an adjustment. And that's what these wing nuts are for, is to adjust the serving. So once I have it in there, I'm going to let it out. I'm going to give it a little tension so it holds that in place. So here's the little tool I was talking about. It's a little tool that I ended up taking an arrow and putting 2 knocks in it. And what I do is I put it on the cable and then I put it in the string. And what that does, it gives you some distance, so when you're winding this, you got some room. Now some people don't use it. I do, just because it makes it easier. But when you're putting serving on bows nowadays, you pull from the center. So I don't want a whole bunch of serving up towards my peep, and I don't want a whole bunch of serving down towards my string stop. So I get it in the middle. I look at the rest of where the middle's going to be, and 2 or 3 inches above and 2 and 3 inches below will be fine. But this is a kid's bow, so it won't be that long. So when you start it, it's just like you're tying in a peep. You want to move it, maneuver it to where it just goes through there, and you begin to make those threads or the tie. And what I'm going to do is, when I get this to about right there, I'm going to tighten up my jig. And the jig is designed to let you do it a little quicker. So you turn it sideways. I hope y'all can see that. And these are the adjustments. So what I like to do is kind of adjust it a little bit loose so I can kind of tell what's happening. And you can tell when you begin to spin this on how tight the serving is. I don't want it super tight, because then it'll change the thickness, and you want to make sure that your knot clips on there properly. So you don't want it too tight, but you want it tight enough so it'll stay. I'm going to give it just a little turn on the wing nut, and you really need to make sure when you have this tail's trying to wind around. Keep your tail down inside the serving. What that's going to do is give it a little bit more distance, a thickness, that whenever you put your knock on there, it'll hold it a little tighter. I don't want my knock too tight. I understand about that, but it just seems to give it some bite and some tooth on that string, so when you pull it back, it's not going to slide up or down on the serving. The serving is going to attach to the string. It's kind of easy. If you make a little flub up, you can undo it as long as it's on here. Like I say, this little tail, that's enough of a tail. I'm going to clip that off so it gets out of the way. I'm telling you, these little things right here are great. Harbor Freight for like $6 or $8. Do a little shout out to Harbor Freight. I think that's the poor man's tool store, but it works really well. So as you're tying the serving, I'm going to get away from the cable guard now, and I can go a little quicker. But the serving tool, all it does is you just flip it. See how easy that is? It's super cool. You kind of think, wow, I should have been doing this myself a long time ago. Sometimes on new strings, most of the time that they're custom strings, or like if you shoot a string that is not custom, they're mass made. Those strings are made by the manufacturer, and not to say that they're not good strings, but they just have a specific tolerance that they use, and as long as they're in that tolerance, you know, they call it good. So what I've done is I just moved my string separator on down, and you just walk this serving and check back and look at it, and man, that is super tight. It looks nice. We're going to run it down here a little bit further, and I like to stop about 1 inch from where I'm going to finish my serving. Got about 1/4 inch to go. Let's move this down a little. Move my magnifying glass. So once you get to this point, I pull off extra. Take my clippers. Now, if you cut this and don't hold on to it, it's going to unravel. So you really want to kind of hold on to it nice. Clip the serving. And what I like to do is use a pair of hemostats, and I'll clip it to this serving just so it holds a little tension. That's all. I don't want my serving to come undone. And just a little bit of tension is fine. Let me find my serving tool here, wherever it went. So the way I like to do a center serving is I'll pull off me some extra and I'm almost out of this serving. I gotta get some more. I like to pull off about 6 or 8 inches. What this is going to do is it's going to ensure that when I tie it on there, I got enough to hold on to. So I take this little, what I've just cut, it's a piece of 6 or 8 inches long, hold it to the middle, and make a loop. Make a loop like this. And what I do is I lay it on the string and I put it in my little string spreader where the knock is. So now I'm going to take this extra and I'm going to begin to wind around that loop. Okay? Don't get it too tight because you're going to pull back through. And you're going to wind down probably about 1 inch, or as long as the string will let you. This may be ended up being about 1/2 inch. Now, the tail that was on that loop is right here. That's the tail. Okay? You're going to take this tie end and run it through that tail. And take the 2 other pieces of the loop and you're going to pull it, holding this little tie. You pull the loop down, you pull that loop and tug on this again. Now what's going to happen is this loop is going to grab a hold of the tie end, and what it's going to do is going to pull it under that serving. So your loop in this tie is under this serving now. I don't like to pull it all the way out. Some people will. I like to keep it tucked in right there. So now, what you're going to do is take your little handy dandy snippers and snip off your excess. And I don't want it to fray, so I'm going to take my lighter. Now when you're using a lighter around a string, be extremely careful. I want to bring the lighter to the string, don't hold it up under. I just want to get my little flame and barely get it and mash it down. Because if you don't do this, it'll fray. So now that we have the serving,
hey Chris, it
this
sure
in
is
place, we're going to put a
in my
D-loop on there.
JX3 hybrid. Fuck you, Jimmy.
Don't sacrifice comfort for your hunt. Get you a JX3 hybrid. Go to jx3outdoors.com, enter code SVO23 to get yourself a discount.
So we're about to tie the D-loop on, and I tend to like my D-loop to match my string, so I know Cameron's going to be totally excited that I found some blue D-loop material. So there's a lot of D-loop material out there. I tend to steer, and forgive me for not knowing, but the stiffer the D-loop for me, the better. So what you'll do is you'll take a piece of D-loop string and you tap down the end. After a fresh cut, you tap down the end, take your lighter and go ahead and make a mushroom on it. Once it's lit, you push it down, and that gives you a nice little mushroom. Now, sometimes you may have to re-hit it, and you want that mushroom to be big enough to where when you tie the D-loop on, it does not pull back through the loop. So you're going to take the loop around the string, and I'm using a very big piece. I know a lot of guys want to use the, a 6-inch piece or whatever. I've got extra, so I don't want to put myself in a bind. So I've got this big piece here. So what I like to do is get the first loop started, and then I take an arrow on Cameron's bow. I'll put it in his rest. run it through the wrist, and I can look at it and see pretty much level, but all I'm trying to do here is get it close, because I can move the D-loop after I get it tied. So you start the D-loop on one side of the string and you finish the D-loop on the other. So I'm going to do the D-loop on the other side of the string, and what that does is when you draw the bow, it pulls it evenly. If you put it on both, if you have the loop that comes off both sides, it'll put a little bit of torque on your string. So you put the loop on there, begin to tighten it up a little. Now Cameron, with a young man, he's not going to pull a lot of poundage, so we're not going to have a whole lot of D-loop stretch. So that's something that on a higher poundage bow you need to pay attention, because if you tie a loop that's a 1/2 inch long, by the time you shoot 100 shots off of it, that thing may stretch to 3/4 of an inch. So I've got these D-loop pliers here. I'm going to use these just to cinch down the loop. You certainly don't have to have this, but it does make it a little bit easier. So now that you have the loop tied, I'm going to take my handy dandy little clippers here. Now right here you can really mess up, because you're going to have to put a little heat on this loop material. So I give myself about 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to clip it. Okay? And then I'm going to take my lighter, I'm going to pull the D-loop that I'm going to hook my release to out of the way, and I'm going to heat that part that I cut. Real easy. Push that down, and man, that ended up turning out great. All right, we have replaced the serving. We put a new D-loop on for Cameron. It's Jimmy Sewell, Southern Bones Outdoors. I hope this helps you.